Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I'm one of the hosts, and we've got a double feature for you guys on this episode. The majority of this is going to be looking at the MCU fourth phase kickoff film, Shang-Chi and the Legend of which Joshua Howe and Alan Cram did a great job discussing that film. Before we get to that, I actually had a chance to sit down with screenwriter Patricia Gomez on her film Slaxx, which you guys can now stream on Shudder, and you guys can also pick it up on DVD and digital right now. Hope you guys enjoy this interview, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. Hello, Patricia. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm well. I wanted to just jump right into it since we don't have that long. I think obviously one of my first questions comes from is, where does the idea for killer trousers come from?
Right? You mean you don't get it every day? It's actually really stems from an inside joke. Elsa and I were on a very long road trip, and we were talking about words we hated, and one of our friends that was also on the drive said she hated the word slacks, so we started saying slacks over and over, and then at one point Elsa and I looked at each other, and we were like, oh my goodness, it's a pair of killer pants. And then from then on, we knew it was like a great idea. And then we went on to write quite a few drafts, actually, until we got to what ended up being the shooting script.
It's interesting when you look at something like Slaxx, especially in like a modern sense, because it has that throwback to like Attack of like the Killer Tomatoes, and like even like more modern stuff like Rubber, and but yet there's, when you guys stand out in a modern sense, there's such a tightness to the narrative that you present this like large cast and then quickly kind of go through some pretty creative depth that I'll talk about in just a second. But you mentioned specifically going through so many drafts. Can you guys kind of talk about the process of like trimming a lot of the fat to kind of talk about the narrative that we end up getting with this Shudder original?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. The first iteration of the script was just horrible. I mean, it took place in a high school. It was about popular girls. I mean, we wrote it and we were so unhappy with it. We were like, what are we doing? This is so lame. And so we put it on the shelf for a few years. We were just both kind of annoyed with what we had done. And then when we picked it up again a few years later, we decided to put it in a store, which made a lot more sense. And I had worked in retail when I was younger, so I fused it with a lot of this retail stuff, this like lingo that they use, and just this idea of a corporation that pretends to be your friend but isn't. And so we had a couple of drafts like that, and it worked a lot better, but we were still missing something. And then we put it on the shelf again. And then a couple of years later, Elsa saw a documentary about fast fashion, and she knew right away that was a missing link. So as soon as we put that element into the script, it gelled really quickly, and it just kind of all came together. And so then it took us about 6 months to get it to the script that you see in the film. So it took a long time to get there, but once we had the right elements, it just kind of gelled, and that was it.
It's also really amazing too, specifically, I think I've seen this a couple times now, and it's on this most recent rewatch as I was kind of coming up with what I wanted to ask in regards to the film's narrative. Is that on paper it's a really ridiculous concept, but you guys managed to make these characters just really authentic, and I'm so glad you brought up the retail, because that was kind of one of the things that I too have worked retail before, and it's honestly some of the worst experiences I've had in my life have come from retail.
Oh, me too. And a lot of it is slack. I had to purge a lot of stuff that I hated, and I just felt so used when I worked retail.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was just being so, I don't know, I just felt like the customers were just a number. And it was always I remember I worked for Gap, and it was you have to mention the sock promo to everyone, and I just hated that. And the managers would watch you like a hawk, and it was just so we wanted to infuse it a little bit with that, because the idea is not just, yes, where does your clothes come from, but also this idea that these corporations, they use everyone. They use the consumers, they use their employees, and they use people abroad. So it's just kind of, we're all kind of their puppets in a way. And so I did want to bring that out, because I felt very used when I worked in retail. I don't know if you felt that way, but I felt very used.
Oh, 100%. I actually got to points in my customer service career where I had to actually have conversations I can't do this anymore, or these are my terms, take them or leave them, kind of thing. And one of the things too is that I think every boss, everybody wants a boss that's kind of like Michael Scott, I guess, with kind of a little bit more organization to him. But I think you capture that spirit of micromanaging and kind of the intensity of these sales through the Monday Madness, and specifically through the Craig character. And it's interesting to hear you kind of talk about your own experience, and one of the things that specifically that sets our publication apart from a lot of the other publications out there is that we create content that is going to, yes, review stuff, but it's also going to, we are also creating content to educate and engage our readers and our listeners on mental health awareness through these things that we're talking about. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about how this experience was really therapeutic for you, kind of how important it is to address kind of creativity as almost therapy.
Yeah, I mean, look, I worked retail because I had no other choice, which I'm sure a lot of people do too. When I was young, I had zero experience. I went into it. I'm not a fashion person at all. If you saw me, I'm a little, jeans and T-shirts, that's it. So, they were very hard years in the sense that it's just, no one's happy. I don't know if you felt this way, but no one was happy at my store. The managers were miserable. They were being used by the regional manager and the regional manager. So it was just it was just a very kind of toxic time. So every time I'd go do my shift, it was very toxic. And the thing that kind of saved it for me was that there were other employees that were very cool, and we were able to kind of band together and get through our shifts together. But it was a very toxic workplace. And I remember at the beginning of every day, it would be this is how much we made last year, and this is how much we have to make today, because we have to increase our profits. There's no way we can increase our profits. And every morning we started off the day like that. It was just something so gross, and then there was so much pressure for us because we had to improve on last year's mark. So, it felt great to kind of throw all this out into the script, all these horrible things. And Craig is really the character. He's, I think, 5 different managers that I had, a little bit of this manager, a little bit of that manager, create this kind of crazy guy named Craig. But I just remember being a very kind of unhappy a place to work at, and it always feels good to get that out.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize you're carrying it until you get it out, and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's great that it's out.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing that, I think that from someone that may have never actually been on the side of retail or customer service is that there's always a version of the truth that they're telling the public, but it's never 100% authentic. And I
right.
think
Yes.
and I don't want to like give spoilers in it, but one of the things that, you know, really makes this film stand out from something like Killer Sofa or Rubber in more recent kind of, you know, absurdity concepts when it comes to horror is the fact that this film specifically has a social commentary twist to it that is revealed in the third act. And I'm kind of curious if you can talk about that for a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that social commentary was very important to Elsa and I. I mean, we just didn't want to make something about killer pants, and there's definitely that corporate layer that we just talked about, which is very important. But like I said, we had a version with just that corporate layer, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. We weren't happy with it. So that social commentary was key to bring it all together. And I think without that, it just wouldn't have worked so well as a film, to be honest.
No, and that for me, even as a viewer, not specifically like as a reviewer, but just as simply as a horror fan watching it this most recent time, like, yes, it has its jokes, and yes, it has really great gags in it throughout the course of it, but it's that final, like, heartbreaking social commentary that's woven into it that really allows this film to be great and memorable and revisitable, because, you know, a lot of the things that the social commentary talks about, and I don't want to give away the twist, but a lot of the things is it captures not only the lies that retail often ask their employees to speak, but also I think some things that, you know, we may be ignorant of in this country that take place in other countries, and kind of how we take advantage of that.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I always hope to entertain when I make films, but I always think it's always great to kind of think about films too, a couple of weeks after, to kind of think of what you've seen and process. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you that I'm like this super like green person that makes her own clothes and stuff. I'm not. So I feel like we're all complicit in one way or another. And to me, it's more about just being aware. And if you can make a small change, obviously, if you can't make a dramatic change, I find it hard to make a dramatic change. And it's just about making small changes. And I think it's so crazy because the things that happen in the third act, there's things that I've read in papers. You know, it's not like Elsa and I have created these incidents that have happened related to fast fashion. They have happened, you know, and we've just kind of twisted them into the story. But the crazy thing is that they have actually happened to people. And I think that's what's so wild about Slaxx, is that, yes, it's fiction, but it's definitely based on what's happening, on truth, right?
Yeah, and my last question is kind of, you know, to end on a little bit of a lighter note, is that one of the things that I really admired about this is just how creative you guys got with a lot of, like, how people die. Because, again, like, to go back to it, you hear the story of, like, the synopsis of this is what this movie's about. And then, as we've been talking about, like, it's so much deeper. But one of the things that I really enjoyed here is watching some of the way in which these people die, because they're brutal, and I never thought that I would ever be squeamish watching a movie about pants that kill.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that you got squeamish. That's like the biggest compliment. I mean, look, I'm a child of the 80s, and so is Elsa. We grew up on a bunch of horror films, and so these deaths were just so much fun for us. You know, because if you watch horror films for like decades, I mean, this is it. This is like the fun part about writing. So writing those deaths was just so much fun. Honestly, we had the funnest time, and I think we were lucky that we were able to get two that were really able to help us get those deaths across the way we envisioned them, which is great. You know, we had great collaborators, and obviously with the pants, just like what a team to get those pants looking so great, you know, because at one point Elsa and I were like, either this will look completely ridiculous or it's going to work. And luckily it works, but it's with a lot of effort. But yeah, the deaths were just great to write, great to shoot.
Yeah, they come off really great. I really enjoyed watching a lot of, like I said, just watching the films. And there are some, like, I think too, it's really easy to kind of look at the cast, especially it being like this major event in Monday Madness, and kind of, you know, one of those things where it's all hands on deck. Like, I definitely in customer service definitely had those days, and they definitely have been just nightmares to walk through. And but there's what really makes this film so satisfying is just kind of seeing how there are these little character moments woven throughout. And again, it's a really surprising element in such a tight script.
Oh, yay, I'm so glad you liked it. And yeah, I mean, the characters, I think the characters just kind of came alive. I know that sounds really cheesy, and I can't believe I said it, but yeah, at some point, you know, these characters were just so clear in our minds, and they just kind of almost wrote themselves, you know, and yeah, there was a lot of, they are loosely based on some people that I knew during my retail stint, but they're just so unique, each character, that they really just kind of write themselves. It's like, this person says this, and this person's like this, and so it's just, overall, once we figured out what was missing, it was a very easy script to write. It just took us maybe like 9 years to figure out what was missing. But then once that came, it kind of came out. It came together in terms of the characters, in terms of everything. It just came out really easily.
Yeah, I mean, good things come to those who wait, and you know, you guys can definitely see a lot of those characterizations, especially. One of the things, too, that I feel like this film does really well, among other things, is how we're kind of introduced to these characters. So you have Libby, who is, like, she just getting hired as, like, this, like, really optimistic, you know, really, like, I can't wait to join this. And then not even halfway through the film, she kind of, you know, starts to see their exchanges with Craig that she just feels really uncomfortable about. And was it always kind of the intent to see this movie through, I guess, the toxicity of this movie through the eyes of kind of like an optimistic newcomer?
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, that optimistic newcomer is kind of Elsa. Elsa was lucky to never do retail, and so I would tell her my stories, and she would be like, what? She couldn't believe it. So I feel like writers always have their character that they kind of are in the script. And so for me, Elsa's Libby. She's being introduced into this horrible world. And if I had to be a character, I'd be Shruti. I feel like I stayed in retail way too long, and I was really bitter. And so I was like a little bit like Shruti, where near the end, I just didn't care about anything. But yeah, so it was always that intention to kind of have that young, optimistic girl kind of go into the world and kind of see what it actually is.
Yeah, and I guess my last question, ending on this note, is obviously there's the CCT is the company that we spend the entire majority of this film with, and there's a sense where this, you know, they're introducing and rolling out this brand new project, and kind of like the company head, Howard, is in attendance to kind of, you know, do this unveiling, and it kind of almost seems like there's like this cult-like quality to it.
Yes,
yeah. And
100%. Oh, yeah.
Kind of like, you know, when you guys were coming up with the idea of how to, you know, make this company, and also at the same time, you know, the company aspect, but also kind of like the CEO or, you know, whatever Howard's side would be, like, what were some of the challenges that you guys were specifically talking about or exchanging when it came to kind of like how you wanted to portray everything?
Yeah, I mean, we had a great graphic designer. I have to say, Brent, our friend Brent, he just really kind of encapsulated what we were going for. And basically some of the references that we were giving him were like SS stuff, SS logos, and this idea of like a rally where it's just complete brainwashing. So I'm so glad that you picked up on that, because that's what a lot of the art direction is based on, is this idea of propaganda. and this idea of the rally and that charismatic leader, which I think all corporations have to have, or at least pretend to have, like a figurehead that's cool and hip. And so, so we kind of, we had like how can I say, like we wanted to give it the vibe, like it was almost like an SS rally during World War II. Like we wanted to make it that extreme. And I'm so glad you picked up on that, because that was the intention from Elsa and myself. And the big core of this story was 100% like communist propaganda, stuff like this. These were all the references that we had given to our graphic designer to create the logo, to create the posters. So it's so cool that you picked up on it, because I'm not sure a lot of people picked up on that element.
I mean, I probably read way deeper into this movie than I probably should have, but it also helps the experience of having that background in retail and customer service.
Yeah, and it's total brainwashing, and you're right, and that's what it is. It's brainwashing on so many levels, and so that rally is just another part of that brainwashing, you know. And that's it. So I'm so glad you picked up on that. That's great. I'm gonna talk to Elsa about this. You know, it's like, why did I pick up on it? And there's a reason why they're called the Super Shapers, SS for short. You know, we're like, this is how, you know, people have used propaganda since the beginning of time, practically, and they're continuing to use it. But now they're using it to sell jeans.
Yeah, there you
have it.
It's super uncomfortable to watch that scene.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like having flashbacks over here. I'm like, yep, definitely remember those days in
right. You have to be so cheerful about things and happy for the company, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, the movie. Congratulations on the movie. I really love it. I think you guys, if you guys haven't checked out Slaxx, it is now streaming exclusively on Shudder and will be out on VOD, digital, DVD, and Blu-ray beginning September 7th. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it was my pleasure. This was so much fun to have a chat like this. I love talking about retail to someone that knows, right?
Yeah. One form of therapy to another.
Exactly. No, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, you have a great day, Patricia, and I hope to maybe our paths cross another day in another project.
Sounds great. Take care, Josh.
You too.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Filling in this week for Captain Nostalgia, I'm Alan Cram, and joining me is Josh Howell.
That's right. That's right. You got it right. It right.
We're both writers for Victims and Villains, and both have our own shows. I co-host the podcast You Have to Watch This Podcast, where each week we talk about different movies that one of us hasn't seen. And Josh, do you want to talk about your show a little bit?
Yeah, I'm over at Nerf Herders Assemble. It's just Seth and I. We're a bunch of nerds, talk about nerd stuff, nerd culture, a bunch of crazy fun stuff. That's what we do.
Yeah. Hey, well, today we're going to talk about some nerdy, fun nerd stuff because we're diving into Marvel, the latest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to hit the big screen and only the big screen. No Disney Plus this time. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yeah, and you actually have to specify it because there's been so much Marvel content this year on multiple platforms. Even this week, you could have been talking about the latest episode of What If.
Exactly.
Yes, if you're talking about just in theaters, yes, Shang-Chi came out and it had one heck of an opening weekend, I'm telling you.
It did. The numbers are still coming in, but last I saw, what was it at? 45 million? I know it was setting some Labor Day records.
Yeah, I think Variety, let's see here. Yeah, Variety was saying crushes Labor Day weekend records with 90 million.
Oh, wow.
90. So destroying 2007's Halloween, which was at 30. I think the 3-day number was 75, but with the 4-day weekend, it was 90.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that's stellar. That's crazy.
For me, at least, this is the first time I've gone back to the theaters outside of last weekend's Creature Feature weekend that I went to with Josh. This is the first time I paid for a ticket to go to the theater. Have you been to the theaters often lately, or?
Yeah, I've been back and forth over the last year. They've been open in Omaha since last fall. I live in Omaha, Nebraska, so
Okay.
Everyone but the Alamo. The Alamo just opened back up, and I've missed the Alamo so much. But
And I've remembered the Alamo, so.
yeah, a lot of the theaters around here still have reserved seats, and some of them even have spacing still throughout those. So I haven't gone to every single movie in the theater, but like Suicide Squad saw that, and Black Widow, and a couple others earlier in the year. So if it's a movie that I would have regularly seen in the theater, and I can, then I try to go to a Thursday night because it's normally not as crowded as a Friday night, and check it out. And so but there were quite a good amount of people in the theater for this movie both times I saw it this weekend.
Oh, you saw it twice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I saw it once, and then Mom wanted to go see it because she's been getting into the Marvel films. So
I've been hearing
that last night.
I've been hearing that a lot. A lot of people's parents are getting into these movies because of the Disney Plus stuff, because of WandaVision and everything. Like everyone's getting they have access to it now, so everyone is getting involved with it, which I think is fantastic. I saw this on a Friday afternoon, so my theater wasn't full, but for a Friday afternoon at 1:00, it was pretty decently full. So can't really complain about that. It was nice just being with people, seeing a Marvel movie again. So.
Absolutely,
I missed
this
that.
This is one heck of a movie to see on the big screen too.
Absolutely.
I'm sure if you have a fancy ass TV at home or a projector, it could look nice too. But there's some spectacle in this. There's the normal Marvel fantastic third act. So I like to see those things on the biggest screen I can get. So
and this is
I'm glad it's up.
This is my first time going to a Dolby Atmos theater as well, so I got the great sound going with it too. So,
oh yeah, I love those screens.
Wonderful experience. I drove an hour to go see it in that theater. Shout out to Warehouse Cinemas in Frederick, Maryland. You guys are awesome.
Nice.
Keep up the good work. So
nice.
All right, so we're going to get into this. We're going to try to keep it spoiler-free as much as possible for a little bit, and then we're going to deep dive into spoilers with a clear spoiler warning. So I'm going to let Josh take the lead here. So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, let's talk about our leading man, Simu Liu. I know, ever since Iron Man, the leading character either sells it or ruins the character. And I think, once again, Marvel's casting is just stellar. I mean, this dude killed it. And I've seen him in a few different things. I have not seen Kim's Convenience, even though that's probably his biggest thing under his belt. But he's been in so many different shows, TV show properties since 2012. He's been in, something as old as Nikita when that came out. He was in a couple episodes of The Expanse, which I love, and I remember him in. but he's been kind of all over the TV map. And then back in, was it 2018, he tweeted to Disney saying, "Hey, what's up? Let's talk about Shang-Chi." And somehow that landed him the role. And I gotta say, he killed it. I loved him in this role.
I hope that technique only ever works for one person, and it's him. If anyone else tries to do that, I don't want to see it. Unless it's like somebody high profile, like if John Krasinski's like, "Hey, let me be Mr. Fantastic," then okay.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think he was absolutely fantastic and is going to be a great fit going forward in the MCU, because this is not the last time we're going to see him. We're going to see him get connected with these other characters down the line. I'm not sure how, but I can definitely see him fitting in with the Tom Holland Spider-Man and Captain Marvel down the line. And I think he's going to be a great fit in this big universe that we already have established. And he's going to blend right in with everyone else.
Yeah, he nailed it. I thought he had the right amount of charisma. I thought he carried the movie really well. I'm not sure if he's a martial artist or if that was somebody standing in for him, but he certainly brought in those Marvel abs that people need. So he nailed that.
It's not a Marvel movie if they don't give you a shirtless scene. Like, they got to show off those abs.
Right. And then his sidekick, Awkwafina, brought in the comedy. And, I'm not going to lie. When I first saw a couple of the trailers, I was worried that she was going to be like a Kat Dennings character. Mm-hmm. And outside of what she did in WandaVision, I never liked that character at all. I thought that character was just annoying all the time.
Yeah.
But she was decent. She was fine in WandaVision. And Awkwafina in this movie was fantastic. I mean, there was a couple times and I was like genuinely just like busting a gut laughing. I thought it had some genuine humor in it, and it flowed really well. And she never felt like, oh my gosh, she doesn't need to be here. Why are they forcing her into every scene? It just felt natural for where she was at in the film.
And I think the biggest part of her part in this film is the chemistry that she has with Shang-Chi. Like their back and forth are fantastic. And one of the slight spoilers, but not really spoilers. One of the things the film does really well is establishing their friendship and not being a romantic entanglement, which a Marvel movie would do usually, but they don't go that route in this. And I really appreciate it for that. But their chemistry together was fantastic. And I was unsure about her to begin with from the trailers that I saw, but I think she was great in this as well.
Mm-hmm. And it really did feel natural. Like, I don't know, you never really know how much is scripted and how much is ad-lib, but there were times when they were going back and forth with each other. There was one specific time that I remember where she like repeated her line twice, and it almost felt like, oh, they kept that in the film because it just felt so natural between them two. They didn't feel like they needed to reshoot it. So yeah, I thought their chemistry was great, and they just worked really well as a duo going through the motions in this movie. So that was really cool to see him with his like secret past, and to see her as the one who's known him ever since he's been in America and kind of experiencing the rest of his life with the rest of us. And I thought she nailed that role really well.
Yeah, and one of the things that the film does really well that I give it a lot of credit for, because we've seen the Marvel origin stories so many times before, where the hero discovers their abilities and is learning to adapt to this. In this one, she's learning to adapt to her best friend's past life. And I really like how he's established in this. He knows what he's doing. He's not like a fish out of water. You get a little bit of that later on in the film, but really he knows what he's about. He knows all this martial arts stuff. He knows, so he's well trained and established already. He just is trying to get away from that life, and I really appreciate that for a first entry into a character's story.
Yeah, and a strong entry. I mean, and it's one that like I really do want to see what he brings to the bigger picture. Like Ant-Man, when he came out, I was like, this is funny, this is cool. But it honestly, if we don't see him get incorporated into the team movies for a while, I'll be fine with that, because it was interesting just having him on his own, and they did throw him into that mix real quick, and for the most part they've thrown everybody into the mix real quick. But this one, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I really, and maybe it's just because we're in a transition period with the Avengers, of, you know, characters that have fallen off in some of the more recent movies, but I'm really interested to see his role going forward, and if he ever does go into one of those team up movies, you know, how he'll pair against other things. But I did like him. I think he brings some freshness to it. So yeah.
You bring up Ant-Man. Since part of the film is set in San Francisco, I was really expecting a cameo, or at least just like a PIM Technologies building in the background, but I didn't see anything.
Something. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, giant Pez dispenser floating in the distance in the background or something.
Yeah.
But,
or just like the giant Thomas the Tank Engine just sitting on the side of the road.
Yeah. Continuing with the cast, who else did you really like in this film?
Okay, I got to pull it up here. So I'm gonna. I did not know that his sister was going to be a character in this. I try to avoid the trailers as much as possible, and I really enjoyed their dynamic, because I could never really tell which way she was going to lean, whether it was towards her brother or towards her father. And I think she did a really good job with the performance in that, so you couldn't really tell which way she was going to go. And I really like that, instead of the I'm just going to be against you. It was like kind of on the fence for a little bit.
Sure.
And I don't want to butcher her name, but she played Xialing.
Mm-hmm. I think her character, for the most part, was in Shang-Chi's shadow, but I think they tried to give her some stuff to do on screen, and they did. I mean, she's part of some important scenes in the film, and you know, it's not Shang-Chi and his sister in the title roles, but they did give her stuff to do, and she was instrumental in a lot of the important stuff in the later half of the film. So I liked her character. I didn't feel like they were throwing just another unnecessary character. I thought for the most part all the cast members were really, you know, well done, and of course their father, Tony, is it Leung?
Yeah,
Tony
Leung.
Leung.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've watched any of his films, I mean, you know, he's an amazing actor. I you know, Infernal Affairs is one of the legendary movies in his roster that Martin Scorsese film was based on, with Leonardo DiCaprio and
The
Matt
Departed.
Damon. The Departed. I love The Departed so much, but then when I found out it was based on a Chinese gangster movie, I immediately looked that one up, and it's a great film. I've loved that. It's probably there's a whole trilogy that they have. The first one is the best one, but Tony he's been in those type of movies. He's been in romance movies in the past, and this movie kind of felt like a mix of those. I felt like when it was supposed to be, you know, romantic or a family element, he did really well in that. When it was supposed to be an action or a villain element, he did really well in that. I thought he was just a strong character, and Marvel, for all of its wins, has always had a problem with forgettable villains. And every once in a while you'll get a Killmonger, or you'll get a Winter Soldier, or you'll get, you know, somebody amazing, but it's because you have some of these other weaker ones. And Tony coming in as the real Mandarin, which we'll get into. I thought he was great as the villain in this role. I thought he really carried the film, and I really cared about his story. And yeah, he was a great cast.
Yeah, they did a great thing with him, where at one point I was like, oh, maybe he's not the bad guy of this. Like, maybe he's not as evil and as horrible as the last 24 movies of the MCU have made me think that the Mandarin was going to be. It made me really feel for him, and like question whether he was going to be the main antagonist of this at all or not, which I thought was surprising. I don't usually get that from a Marvel movie. You do get the sympathetic villains every once in a while, like you said, with like Killmonger. But I was like really like thrown by it. Like I wasn't sure if I should start to trust him or not. And he almost had me. And I think that says a lot about his performance and about the way the story was scripted and how they went about telling this story they wanted to tell.
Yeah, well, without getting into the spoilers, I just felt like whatever emotion he was supposed to be presenting on the screen, he nailed it. When he was supposed to be an intimidating presence, he was very intimidating. When he was supposed to be a fatherly family man presence, you felt like he belonged in that. You didn't feel like either one of those sides of him were fake, or that the actor himself just wasn't pulling it off very well. I just thought that he was brilliantly cast, and he was just great in the film. I really did like him in the film. The only other cast member I can really think of that had a prominent role was Michelle Leon, who played a role we won't get into, but she was also in the film, and she was great as well. I think she was just as much of an intimidating presence as her counterpart, and she's been in films for a long time as well. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She's been in Bond films. She's been in Crazy Rich Asians, which I think this film took some influence from as well. And I think she was just another strong cast member.
I know her from Star Trek Discovery. That's where I know her from.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and I don't really watch that show, but she is pretty prominent in that.
Yeah, she was the captain in the first season, kind of. It's weird what they did with her character, and I don't want to spoil that for anyone. But she's prominent in that show. But I also know her from she's in a previous Marvel film. She's in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as one of the Ravagers that joins Stallone's team at the end. So I'm curious if they're going to retcon it so that they're she's just two different people, or if they're maybe somehow connected. I doubt they are. I highly doubt they're connected, but I think it's just kind of cool that you can get these actors to show up in Marvel movies as different people, and it's still believable.
Well, what is this? Is this the 25th or the 26th
25th.
film?
25th
okay,
film.
When you get 25 films into a saga, you're bound to, potentially have an actor play a different role, and you just gotta kind of hope that they play it differently enough, or somehow write it in,
And it's not like it's as prominent as Chris Evans going from Human Torch to Captain America. It's not that big of a role. It's a lot smaller, but it still is. It's a great performance, and I really enjoy her dynamic with Shang-Chi's character and their story that they tell and their moment that they have that we'll get into in the spoilers.
Well, I think we want to talk about spoilers, but overall, did I talk to you about Black Widow? Were we on that call together? Or was that somebody else?
I was not on that call. I was on vacation that week.
Okay. Well, that was another Marvel movie that came out over the summer, and I think that's been very divisive with the fans, whether or not it did justice for the character, whether or not it was a top tier or bottom tier Marvel film. So just out of curiosity, with two, pretty big Marvel movies coming out within months of each other, how do you think this ranks in comparison to Black Widow?
I think, given the choice between the two, I'm going. I think Shang-Chi is just a stronger film. Black Widow has a lot going for it with the performances, and they do a really good job with the family dynamic there. I think Shang-Chi does the family element even better because it's not just this. Shang-Chi's just more believable, and it's like there's just something about Black Widow that I think the main reason, and I said this in the car on the way back from the theater, so The main reason I think I had a problem with Black Widow was I knew there were no stakes. Like I knew at the end of this, she's going to be okay, and she's going to go on to be in the next 2 Avengers films that take place after this. In this, there were actual stakes. Like you don't know where these characters are going, and it's a lot easier for me to get invested when I don't know what's coming next. And I think that's one of the strongest suits for the MCU as a whole. Like at the end of Infinity War, you don't know what's going to happen next. You know that there's an Ant-Man movie that comes out and Captain Marvel, but they both take place before this. You don't know what's coming afterwards. I think the MCU is at its best when you're setting up something for down the line and not taking a step back and telling a prequel to a character that has been well established. Whereas Shang-Chi, we've never seen before. This is the first time we're seeing him on the big screen or any screen really, and it's a lot easier for me personally to get invested. So I think that's why I'm choosing this one over Black Widow.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I feel one of my issues with Black Widow is I just didn't feel like Disney Marvel put as much passion or as much heart into it. It felt like maybe it was a contract obligated film or something like that they just needed to do and get rid of so that they can move on. It felt like there were missed opportunities in terms of story, in terms of cameo, in terms of connection with the bigger universe. I just felt like they just made the movie so they could say that they make it, that they made it for the fans and then move on. Whereas Shang-Chi, I've been ever since whatever the last Spider-Man movie was, that was kind of the epilogue.
Far From Home.
So Far From Home was the epilogue to the Infinity Saga. Ever since then, I've been kind of waiting. Like what are we in for? What is this next stage in the Marvel universe? And we've had these Disney Plus shows, which have not been bad. They've been good and they've been really interesting, but they've either been soft launching points or not really launching points at all. They've been kind of just like, these are the stories that have going on that probably wouldn't have made it great on the big screen, but they're still interesting enough for the character building. Shang-Chi felt like, okay, this is we're getting back into this. It didn't feel like it was burdened with connecting to some bigger story at all. But it did feel like, all right, this is a full investment into a new character, and then that character's future in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it got me excited about what's coming. I mean, I care what's coming in the next Spider-Man movie and in the next Doctor Strange movie, but for them to introduce a new character this late into the game and for me to really be interested in it, I think that's a feat in itself, and so I really enjoyed it.
Well, just a quick side note, I saw the trailer for the Eternals in front of this, and I hadn't seen that trailer yet. And just seeing that on the trailer on the big screen, I was like, this film looks fantastic. Like, this looks like nothing I've seen in the MCU before. I cannot wait for that film. Like, I was going to go see it, but now I'm really excited to see what they do with that, especially after this, when they have such a strong introduction to this one character. I'm really curious to see what they do with a team at this point, because you have this award-winning director whose name is escaping me right now, doing the Eternals. But I'm just
she won Best Director at the Oscars.
For Nomadland.
Chloe Chow, is it?
Chloe Chow, yeah, that's it. But yeah, just seeing that on the big screen, I don't want to say that it was like, oh, I'm back in the theater and just
Chloe's
out. Yeah. I don't know if it was just seeing it on the big screen that got me excited, because I also got really pumped for the Venom Let There Be Carnage trailer. But I really enjoyed that trailer, and I'm just excited to see what Marvel does going forward with introducing new characters, whether it be on the big screen or with some of the Disney Plus shows that we have coming out, like Miss Marvel or Kate Bishop showing up in the Hawkeye show. So
yeah, well, that and I know we need to get into spoilers. We could talk all day about the future of the MCU.
Yeah.
The thing about that Eternals trailer is that to me it feels so disconnected. Like it even looks like a different Marvel film. It's got it's got that muted colors thing that people have been dogging on Snyder for years about. It's got these characters that we've never seen before. It just looks so separated. And I think it kind of works for that because these folks have been around, but they've kept themselves separated from everything. Like that's definitely the theme of the trailer, that they have, stepped back and let all these things happen, and now they're stepping in. So it makes sense for the movie itself to look so different. Whereas Shang-Chi looked like another Marvel film. It's got those colors. It just has the flow. It looked like it fit into the same world that we've all been living in for the past 24 films. So to a point, well.
There's something in here that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
We'll get into that, but.
Well, yeah, I think if you want to get into spoilers, now is a good time to do so.
I think so too. So if you haven't seen Shang-Chi yet, come back later and check out the podcast. But I think right now we're going to get into spoilers. And I think right away I want to talk about the part of this that didn't look like anything I've ever seen in a Marvel movie or in any media. And that was the village in another dimension with all of these mythical Chinese Asian creatures like the dragons. I thought all of that was breathtaking. I've never seen those creatures brought to life in any way outside of the puppets that you will see at a parade. And I was just taken aback by all of that. The little creatures that are running around, just all of this whole world of mythology that I don't really know, these creatures that I'm not familiar with. I was just really taken aback by all of that.
Yeah, they had that. They had the kitsunes in there, which is the fox type looking creature with the multiple tails. I've seen that in so many like fantasy stories and anime stuff, and when I saw them on a little hill in the village, I was like, oh wow, they're just going all out. And then of course you got the weird horses and the dragons and the faceless what did she call it, chicken pigs. They had all kinds of creatures there. That was really interesting for sure.
Yeah, that was visually probably the most breathtaking thing that I saw in the MCU in a long time. Yeah.
The first 2/3 of this film felt like it lived in the MCU universe we're used to. Even them going to other places. They went to China for like the second half or the second third of the film. That even that world felt like it existed in the MCU as we've seen it before.
Especially when you get the Easter eggs that you have in that Fight Club scene. So
yeah. Well, we don't have to go scene by scene, but I kind of want to talk about a little canonically the events that happen in the film. I really like how this film started off with Tony's character, Tony Young, going through the ages with these 10 rings. I love how we didn't see where he got them because we don't need to, like that's that would just open Pandora's box. Like I think they said something like somebody said he found it in a crater or somebody else said he found it in a tomb. It doesn't matter. He's got them now, and he's the legend that went through 1,000 years just kicking ass and taking names. And that was a cool montage of him and his army just wrecking shit up throughout the beginning. I love that opening.
I love the way they told that story from the beginning, like how from the mother's point of view and them meeting, and then like their chemistry when they meet and their fight sequence, which I'm not big into that type of film, but I just thought it was so well done and such a great tribute to like the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type films and that fighting style. I thought they hit the nail perfectly on the head with that.
Oh yeah, they plugged in so many tributes. You know, they were going to put everything you would possibly associate with an Asian martial arts movie. You had the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type martial arts. You had the sea of arrows coming down from the opposing army that you've seen in films like Hero and every other film out there. So yeah, they put a lot of that in, and it worked. Like it was intriguing. It was a little bit different scene by scene, and I liked that introduction to the mother. I thought that was he was a dick all the way up until that point. Like he didn't care at all about the other people that went over the cliff. He was just like, I'm surviving. I'm gonna keep going.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. I know we got a whole rest of the movie to talk about. I loved Tony as this villain, but I felt like they kind of neutered him a little bit. Like, we get to see the two sides of him. We get to see the family man side, and then we get to see the retribution, revenge side when he loses his wife. And I loved seeing that. But I also feel like they were trying to retcon their mistake with Iron Man 3. This did not feel like... I know it wasn't, but this did not feel like the plan from the beginning. You know, I don't think there was a plan, but if folks remember, Ben Kingsley played the Mandarin in Iron Man 3 as this terrorist that was vicious, that was, you know, unrelenting, and then it turned out he was just some British actor that was high that somebody convinced to play a role. And then you had Guy Pearce, breathing fire, saying, no, I'm actually the Mandarin. So then I don't know if you've ever seen this, but then there was like a little scene they made for the DVD of Iron Man 3 where they showed Ben Kingsley in prison, and the real an assassin from the real Ten Rings shows up and says, you know, you've been mocking our leader. So I've always been waiting for this menacing, this badass, boss to come in and saying, you've been trashing my name, and I'm the real Mandarin, as people have waited for from the Iron Man comics from the 90s. He was Iron Man's Joker. He was the big bad. So then when this film does address that, and I was waiting for it because he brings it up at like a dinner scene, and he's like, that's not even my name. That's the name of an orange. Yeah. And I was like, I guess that's a way to take it, but it felt like, okay, so he's not really the Mandarin. In fact, with his logic, the Mandarin doesn't even exist. That was something that they made up for Ben Kingsley's character. So really, the MCU doesn't really have a Mandarin. Or at least that's how I read into it.
No, I think that's a fair way to read into it. The way I look at it is there are two Ten Rings. You have the one that is established in this film that has been around for centuries. Then you have the one that Guy Pearce created for Iron Man 3 with Ben Kingsley's character, which is only really seen in Iron Man 3. I think the Ten Rings that we see in Iron Man 1 and 2, because they're the ones who give the wrestler his plane ticket to go to America, Mickey Rourke. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who give him his ticket. I think that is the Ten Rings from this film, because this is around the time after his wife died, and they're rebuilding what they lost while he was away building this family. So I think you have a weaker Ten Rings in Iron Man 1 and 2, but in Iron Man 3, and then in Iron Man 3, the whole idea of them is stolen for Ben Kingsley's character. I think it is a little bit of a retcon with him saying they named me after an orange. I agree. I don't think this was the plan. I think this is the best way they could go about trying to fix that, to try to please everyone. I'm kind of glad I didn't get to see Iron Man fight this Mandarin, because I don't see how it would have, I don't see how the fight would have really gone in any, I don't think it would have been as interesting as him going up against his own son. So
yeah, I mean, but outside of that, again, I think that Tony's performance was fantastic. And when I let that go, because I was like, oh man, they're really wanting me to feel for this guy, and I've been waiting so long for the real Mandolin or just to show his face and to be this menace that I remember reading in the comics. But as soon as I let that go, and I was just like, you know what, this is the story that we get, so I'm just gonna watch it and try not to judge it on my expectations.
Yeah.
And I really did feel, I felt for him. I felt for the trajectory of his character, that he went from this conqueror to this person who finally met his match, and he gave up something and she gave up something, and they had this family, and then it was robbed for him. The sins of his past caught up to him, and I did like that dynamic for him, and I thought he played it really well. And then when we catch up to him in present day, he played the broken man who now is just obsessed with this purpose really well. Like you felt like he didn't come across as crazy. He came across as burdened with purpose, and I felt for him. And yeah, I, like you said, I was having a hard time looking at him as the villain. I was like, he's clearly tortured as a person, but how do we know he's not actually hearing these things? He wants the love of his life back, and I can't really blame him for wanting to do that.
Exactly, so. Especially when you see what happened to her and like how tragic that scene is. We hinted on Iron Man 3 a little bit, and I need to ask you, how do you feel about Ben Kingsley in this movie?
So yeah, I did wonder if they were going to bring him back, because those scenes, like that scene on the DVD of Iron Man 3, unless somebody bought that and watched it, it's not like those are kind of canon.
Well,
for me, it's always.
I think it is canon now, because they put that one on Disney Plus this past week. So.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but for a while it was, well, did you see that scene? And I mean, it took me years to see that scene. I didn't know about it right away. So I was waiting for, okay, did he die at the end of that scene or what? So it was kind of like, oh, he's kind of the prisoner. He's the jester. And I did like that. I did think I kind of wanted some interaction between him and Tony, to be like, this is the guy that tried to use my name, and now he's my little plaything, for a while. Yeah. But I did like him. I thought I think he could have overstayed his welcome, but they had him in just enough that he wouldn't.
I think he was like teetering that line a little bit in the car before they started driving, and then they started going. So okay, you almost had too much. I'm glad the scene ended what it did, but it was towing the line so much for me. I was like, and Iron Man 3 is probably one of my top 3 MCU films. I almost said Iron Man films. There's only 3 of those.
Yeah, I would think it would be.
Yeah,
it's one of your top MCU films. Are you serious?
I think at least top 5.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I've even got the poster behind me.
I see it.
I actually just bought that today. It's weird. I found a whole book of MCU posters for like $4. I was like, okay.
Nice.
But I really liked how they continued that story and you got to see what happened to him. It's like a nice little epilogue to the Iron Man films. That doesn't include Spider-Man. But I really enjoyed his dynamic, especially with the chicken pig. So.
Yeah, he was teetering that line a lot. Although, as much as it was just like, come on, let's get to the village, that Planet of the Apes story did crack me up so much. Like, I was laughing. The whole theater was laughing at that point. I mean, when he was just so dumb.
Yeah.
Thinking that the monkeys were acting, not people acting as monkeys. That was just done so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, I saw a video online. It was somebody doing the "Don't tell me it wasn't real," but it was like with the monkeys from Planet of the Apes. The "Don't tell me it wasn't real" speech from Black Widow.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, yeah, nice. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first half of the movie, we have a lot of martial arts scenes that do not have 10 rings involved. The bus scene was fantastic.
Yeah, I love that scene.
It was great. You could definitely tell it was a Disney Marvel film because there was no blood at all. Like, that's the only thing that kind of takes me out of these films, when these martial arts scenes go on for longer than 2 seconds and you're just like, oh, they just don't bruise, they don't bleed. There was one scene where we see Shang-Chi bleeding on the floor of after his fight with his sister. But other than that, there's no blood in this film, and that kind of took me out of it. But the martial arts themselves, I mean, that bus scene reminded me of, Jackie Chan classics and Jet Li stuff. I mean, it was not only performed really well, but it was shot really well, and that it wasn't, ridiculous amounts of cuts to where you're just annoyed, and you could enjoy the shots, and I really appreciated that scene.
It does a great job of, the editing does a great job of following the action, and it doesn't cut to weird angles just to cut to them. Like, every movement, every cut for the camera is justified. And that is so important to me in a Marvel film at this point, because they don't do that often. But that bus fight scene might be one of my favorite fight scenes in the MCU. Overall.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great scene. It was well choreographed. There's a lot of action. There was a lot of variables. I even cracked up when they threw in that YouTuber, Twitch guy or whatever. He's like, I took some karate when I was a kid, so I'm gonna try to judge this. Like, that was. And that's so true. Like, I 100% expect somebody to do that.
Exactly.
So that was great. Having seen Nobody earlier this year with Bob Odenkirk, which also had a great fight scene on the bus, I was like, all right, this is the year of bus fight scenes. And this one was just as good as Nobody, except it didn't have any blood. But I really liked that scene. And then the next martial arts scene we saw at the Fight Club. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the Fight Club. I thought... I knew we couldn't spend a whole movie around that Fight Club, but I thought that the Fight Club for me was too short to enjoy it. But what did you think?
I was kind of surprised it wasn't on Madripoor, which we were introduced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
It kind of felt like that, didn't it?
It really did, because there were a lot of Easter eggs there, which I enjoyed. You get to see a Black Widow fighting an extremist soldier, and then you have the Abomination and Wong fighting in the center ring. I really enjoyed, like, I could spend the whole Disney Plus series with just that element, like just going through that, like just the Tournament of Champions, I guess. I really enjoyed that environment. I was just surprised that it wasn't something that country off the coast that no one really addresses as a real place except for the criminals.
Yeah, and first of all, I would love who's the guy you just mentioned? He's with Doctor Strange.
Wong.
And he's fighting the Abomination. I feel like he deserves his own show. Like, he's great. I would watch a whole show with him and his whatever he's doing. I wish his fight with Abomination would have gone a little longer. And I also thought that, like, in the trailer, you don't see enough of him, but you saw enough to be like, oh shit, is that the Abomination from the Hulk movie? And then in the actual movie, he kind of looked weird. Like, I don't know if that was something that they had to change him so much because of the contract issues they have with whoever owns the Hulk franchise. But, like, even the face thing, like, I don't know if they actually brought Tim Roth back to do his face, but the face looked weird. It was weird.
I don't know if they brought him back for this. I know they're bringing him back for She-Hulk.
Yeah, and I heard that, and so I figured that these would be connected, but it just looked so weird.
Well, but even I'm sure part of it has to do with the Universal contract, because Universal still owns the Hulk characters. Another part of me is like, well, if you look at the Hulk from that movie versus the Hulk that we got, even in just Ragnarok, they're two completely different beasts.
Sure. Sure.
So I think it's just an evolution of this character who's probably been stuck in this form for, at this point in the MCU, is what, 15 years or so. I think it's just a natural evolution of what that mutation will do to him. And I don't think we got to see enough of it. I'm curious what him and Wong are up to. Like, I'm really curious what's going on there, because it looks like they're kind of working together or training or something. Which intrigues me. I'm excited that we get Wong in 2 more movies in the next year. So
I know. I love him. I think he's been an excellent character for the MCU, and so when he pops up in this film and then in the after credit scene, I was just like, yes, just give us more Wong. He's great.
Yes.
And then of course we get the sister reveal, and I absolutely knew that she was going to be that person. And she kicks his ass. I did like, one of the things that I think films can do really terribly or really well are flashback scenes, and this film has a lot of them. We see these 2 children growing up, both under their mother and their father, and then just under their father, and it flashes back to the same couple of scenes a couple of times from different perspectives, whether it's the son's perspective or the sister's perspective. I thought for the most part this film did flashbacks really well. You got to see the side of the sister being left behind. You got to see the side of the son being like, that classic, you may be the one that picks up the mantle when you grow up, so you need to be involved from an early age. And then seeing him and the only thing they didn't show in the flashback was him actually killing his mother's killer, but I thought they handled the flashbacks really well, and I never felt like, oh my gosh, another one. Like, I thought they were short enough and they were spaced out, and in the flow of the story, it just worked. That it helped the story progress. I thought they did well with that.
Yeah, the flashbacks didn't really take me out of it at all, and I think that's the best way you can do flashbacks, is to have them feel natural enough to the story that you're telling and fit well with the present day stuff. And I think the film did that really well. I was kind of worried, though, at one point they were going to show who they sent him to kill, and it was just going to be Tony Stark in a cave with a box of scraps. I'm glad they didn't go that route.
I know.
But
well, he said he did kill somebody, so it sounded like whoever it was. I was just like, oh, are we going to see a teenager kill somebody? And I think in most films you probably would have seen that. Maybe that's a little too dark for Disney Marvel to do, and so they kept it out of it. But I did like the progression of and again, I forgot about a third perspective. You see it from the father's perspective, so you see these same scenes multiple times in the film, but again, they're just short enough, and they're from different perspectives each time that it engrosses you in this family dynamic from different angles. So by the time the end comes, you feel like, okay, you understand the full dynamics of this family. And to do that in one film, not a show, I thought that was a pretty good achievement. I really felt like I knew what this family was, and they didn't have to. They showed it. They didn't have to tell me it. They showed it. And so I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in show don't tell, and I think you're absolutely right. The film does a great job with that. Yeah, I perfectly said. I don't know what I can't follow that up.
Well, I mean, just keeping along with the story. So then we get more into the father comes back into the scene and tells his children that he's been hearing the voice of their mother, and that the mother is being held captive by her people. And to this point, we've never seen her people, and so it's not necessarily illogical that someone with magic powers could have a people with magic powers that might be holding her hostage for some reason, even though the children had seen her killed. We've seen more fantastic elements in the Marvel universe before, so Again, it's kind of hinted towards, well, he's not really a bad guy. I felt like they neutered him a little bit, but at the same time, you did see him say, "We're gonna go get your mom, and if they don't give her to us, we're gonna kill everybody there." And that was at least bringing his conqueror side back, you know.
Yeah.
And I did like how the children weren't just immediately like forgiving their father and yes, let's team up and go get our mother. Like they still recognized they took a lot. There was a line in the trailer that is not in the film where Shang-Chi tells his father, "No, I'm not going to join you. You're a murderer. You know, you're a killer." And he says, "Watch your tone when you talk to me, boy." That's not in the film, which I was kind of sad. But they do say, you know, what you're saying is crazy. We're not going to go help you kill a bunch of people just because you think you hear mom's voice. And I did like that there wasn't just some forgiveness of everything that their father did just because of this fantastic thing that he's telling them.
Yeah, I was worried they were going to go that route, and I'm super glad that they didn't. Because I feel like if they went that route, everything that you build up before that would have been lost. And I'm super glad they did not go that route. Because then you get this wonderful scene where they arrive at the village and they're welcomed with open arms eventually by the village and by their mother's family. And their aunt played by Michelle Yeoh.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she is pretty much the one that accepts him. Originally, I don't know if it's the town elder or whatever, but he's got, you know, weapons ready and get back in your car and get the hell out of here. And the aunt's like, "No, you deserve to be here." I thought that was nice that they brought him in. That I thought it was nice that their mother, who knew them as very small children, apparently guessed what their body sizes and weights would be 20 years later, that she can make these armored suits for him.
Every year she's like, "Oh, gotta readjust the outfits now." To be in defense of the village, if a car that said Razor Fist on it pulled up to me, I'd be on the defensive too. So
sure. But hey, if I mean they didn't leave it that guarded, like
no.
So you just have to get to the waterfall and then you're in, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like Stargate where you have to dial it up and everything like that. And I'm binging Stargate right now, so I'm thinking of the water and the portal. Nice. It's very similar. But yeah, so they get to the village. They have a little bit to get acclimated there. The son is remembering his mother talking to him about this alternative fighting style. He picks it up a little quick, but you know, it's fine. It's the pace of the movie is getting to that third act finale right now.
Yeah.
Before we get into the super fantastic elements of the third act, we get this little bad guy army, miniature army versus good guy miniature army. They both have, you know, the good guys have this dragon scale type super tech, and the 10 rings have this taser tech thing. So it's kind of a modern war, and I gotta say, like, I didn't hate it or anything like that, but the best martial arts of this film I felt were in the first half of the film, before the 10 rings and the magic and everything got involved. I really do feel like the second half of the film, once you start bringing in the 10 rings and you bring in these other elements, the martial arts weren't as captivating to me, because I love martial arts films like The Raid and The Raid 2 and Jackie Chan's, you know, crazy collection, and even something like Jason Statham's Transporter. I love stuff like that. And so when they took it away from martial arts and brought it to more like 10 ring stuff and all these other, you know, magic elements, it didn't feel as amazing to me in terms of fight scenes.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it does lose a little bit because there was so much going on. You can't focus on one person fighting another. When you get so many at once, it gets a little bit harder to keep that dedication to focusing on the action in the way they were doing earlier on in the film. I think when you get into the Ten Rings and Shang-Chi, like their duel is not so much about the martial arts for me. It was more about the relationship there and like who's willing to do what and how far are they willing to take this. And like, that's what drew me in. Like I was watching with like just anticipating like the next move and not really focusing as much on the style as much, but like I was so invested by that point that the style wasn't as important to me as the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, the drama, especially the first, father-son fight was great. I mean, he was wiping the floor with his kid there up until the last second, and then, Shang-Chi stepped up and got some licks in before he got catapulted into the lake or whatever. But that was, that was great. And then they come back on the cliffside and fight again, and the drama between the two definitely fueled those. But I couldn't help but think about the future of this character and how much I loved seeing him fight on the bus and seeing him fight in the Fight Club, and thinking we're probably not going to see that again. We're probably going to see more of the stuff with the Ten Rings, which is cool. But like, I just can't see him bringing that type of fight choreography back in like an Avengers film. I can't see him just doing fighting. Like unless he has some type of story thing where he's like, I got to step away from the rings for a bit. I could just see him doing more ring stuff and less martial arts stuff.
And the ring stuff is cool to a point, but I think there will be a point in the future where he doesn't have the rings and has to rely on his own fists instead of the magical rings that are bequeathed to him.
Mm-hmm. One would hope so, because he's just a badass. His character is badass. But I did think it was kind of cool, the different inventive ways they used those 10 rings. Like, there was, his father is all Iron Manning it all over the place, with his thrusters, and then even, like, cushioning his fall when he comes back. I thought that was just cool. Like, they came up with cool ways to use those rings. And how it's not just something you're throwing at somebody. The guy was using it to fly pretty much and do different things. I really thought that they went all out with creative ways to make those things formidable weapons.
Yeah, and not even just weapons, just tools in general, because at one point they're pretty much used as steps, which I thought was very interesting and much better than anything they did with the rings in Sonic the Hedgehog. So
right. Well, then we get to the final beast battle, and especially with this being the first film, you don't know how far they're gonna take it. Like, you get this. Okay, the legend says of this creature and soul suckers and a dragon, and you're like, okay, are they gonna go that far in the first movie? Are they gonna hold that off to some other? No, they go all out, and I think that might take some people out of the film. But for me, I thought for the most part the CGI looked really well, and it was just like they didn't give you a time to breathe to like take it in. It was just there, and it's a threat that the main characters had to face. And I thought for the most part they pulled it off. They pulled off a dragon and soul suckers in the Marvel MCU, and I wouldn't have thought that was possible.
Yeah, I didn't. I like the animation they did for the soul sucking. It was similar to things we've seen before in the MCU, but it was quick enough that I was like, oh wait, that's what's happening right now. Okay, like it wasn't. I didn't need to explain to me. It looked cool, and it wasn't like we talked about before. It wasn't bloody, so you can get away with it in a Disney film. So
yeah, those creatures, unless you use dragon scales against them, they just kind of phased. Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That normal weapons, you just can't do anything against. I mean, thank goodness this village has all of the dragon scales.
Exactly.
But, they threw a lot at you in those last 20 minutes. And did you think it was too much at any point?
I don't think it was too much. I think there is a lot there, but I think they present it in a way that is understandable enough and easy to follow that it worked for me. I think some people might be overwhelmed by it, but I think it worked out for me at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it worked for the film. I think the only thing that I kind of like rolled my eyes at was Awkwafina doing that perfect shot, less than 24 hours after picking up a bow and arrow for the first time in her life. So, and she just did this, and it was also, it was like, what is the scale of this thing? Because it looks like it's like football fields into the sky, and yet she's able to perfectly, get it. But whatever. I mean, there's you can hang on things like that, or you can move past them. But like you said, I was fully expecting when Shang-Chi came back to the village, there was just going to be this classic make-out session between those two. And who knows, there could be down the line. But the movie told you in the beginning, no, we're just friends. Even though the grandma was like, when are you going to get married? And by the end of the movie, they still were just friends. And they were close friends that maybe could develop into something more, but you didn't feel this forced, like, they need to become romantic partners by the end of this film. And I thought that was done really well.
I have a question for you. I read something into their relationship, especially when it came to the friends they were meeting for dinner, that bookend the film. Mm-hmm. I got the impression the friend who was like judging their way of life wasn't snapped away, but those two were. So they were still kind of stuck where they were post-snap. Did you read into that at all?
So when she brings that up in the thing, Awkwafina kind of has an expression on her face, and I did wonder. I mean, I guess that's going to be the question over every new character we think about. Like it could have gone either way. It felt like that would.
Because
but then he's not crazy younger than his sister, so like
that's fair.
I think that the story they were saying is that they just didn't want to grow up, or they just didn't want to go traditionally. But I mean, that it could have been. Been.
Yeah, I was just
like how they're throwing that in, where we live in a world where this happened. That was an interesting part of that argument.
Yeah, and they don't have to go into too much detail about it because everyone knows at this point, like, what they're talking about. Like, that's such a big event in the MCU. Like, if you mention, like, yeah, you remember that time that, like, a big Pez dispenser showed up? Like, not everyone's going to get that reference. But you talk about the snap, then everyone knows, like, what you're addressing.
Right. So that's an interesting element. I love that Wong showed up at the end and said, hey, we need to talk to you. I wonder what Awkwafina's role is going forward, because he's like, we need to talk to you too. I mean, again, like, I fully expected her to be Kat Dennings level character, and she wasn't. She was, she held her own throughout the movie. Do I think she's going to be, like, a partner in the Avengers? No. So I'm wondering, like, maybe he just brought her along because she's connected with Shang-Chi, but I hope they don't force her to be, like, a warrior going forward. Like, she can just be, like, a character that's stronger than your average side character. But I don't know. I wonder what they're going to do with her in the future.
Yeah, I'm curious about that, too. Part of me wonders, like, they've done a really good job with establishing side characters in a lot of the things that we've seen over the last year from Marvel, like Darcy and Jimmy Woo. Like, part of me wonders if they're building it up for them to, like, get their own, like, X-Files esque project in the MCU, and maybe she could be a part of that. But I can see her just being there, like, the moral support for him as he adjusts to this world, and, like, working with Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers and Wong and Doctor Strange and all this, like, just keeping him grounded in reality, I think is going to be part of it. I'm really curious to see where they go with it moving forward.
Yeah. The one thing, the film is called Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Well, There's a lot of Shang-Chi in this film. There's not a lot of Legend of the Ten Rings in this film. This is very much like if the book was called The Legend of the Ten Rings, this is like the prologue. Like it's almost like the jumping off point. Like I could see the next film, because you're wondering, the village didn't seem to act like that was their tech.
Yeah.
And yet, whenever the mom messed with the Ten Rings, or whenever Shang-Chi messed with the Ten Rings, they changed color. Now that Shang-Chi has them, they're permanently this orangish, yellowish color. Apparently now that Shang-Chi has them, they're emitting a signal, but they weren't for 1,000 years when his father had him. So there's a lot of question marks around the rings, and they're clearly setting up to be something. Who's it pinging? Who's it messaging? What's it made out of? Is it alien tech? Is it tech from another dimension? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I definitely think the title is referring to the rings themselves and not like the organization. And I think the rings are key. Like if the Infinity Stones were the key to the Infinity Saga going into Endgame, like everything before that into there, I think the rings are the stepping stone for whatever is next in the MCU, whether that's Galactus or Doctor Doom or whatever's going on in the Eternals. I think they're part of whatever is next for this MCU. And I think that, these are like the Tesseract. Like you get to see it now. You don't quite know what it is, but it's going to be key going forward. Like to the point where it's going to just show up in every movie, and you're like, oh, not the Ten Rings again. Like,
right? Yeah.
Because I definitely got to that point with the Tesseract, especially when it showed up in Captain Marvel. I was like,
right. And I was wondering though, because I'm not completely sure about this. There's a scene where the aunt is walking Shang-Chi and his sister down this hallway, and there's this big wooden mural, and she doesn't say had, she says we have giant cities, and it shows these amazing things that reminded me, a lot of this film kind of reminds me of Black Panther and Wakanda, but she mentioned these cities, and then I couldn't tell are those cities completely gone? Like, did the Soul Suckers completely destroy, and these are the remnants in this village, or did they just choose to come here to save Earth?
I think most of the cities are gone. I think the village is its own thing, but I think the cities themselves are almost, if not completely, gone. I think that they were taken out by the Soul Suckers, from my interpretation of that story.
Okay. Because I was just wondering if we'd ever see an expansion of these people,
I think there are other like villages in the dimension. I think they could probably, if they wanted to, they could probably bring in the mythical village from Iron Fist. Maybe not the Netflix show, but just the comics. Bring in Iron Fist to this, because you also have the martial arts aspect in that character. I think you could have that, like, where he gets his powers be another village down the line.
Sure. And the other thing that I was thinking about just going forward is, I couldn't help but make the comparisons between this and Black Panther. Not in a bad way, but these are both films bringing in a lot of culture that we haven't seen in the MCU before. And it just kind of made me feel sad, because, like, I am so now invested in Shang-Chi and in Simu Liu and his portrayal of this character, and I can't wait to see his future in the MCU. And I just thought about Chadwick Boseman and how he just nailed Black Panther. And thankfully we got to see him in a little bit more. He was in some team-up movies. He was in Civil War. He was in Infinity War. And he had a small part at the end of Endgame. But, man, I wanted to see Black Panther too, And we get a little more of him in What If in this alternate fashion. but it's just devastating now to remember that his first Black Panther was just as monumental as this film. Brought in so many new elements to the MCU and set up. It was a great setup for the future of a character, and now, you know, we'll get more of Wakanda and stuff like that, but we're not going to get more of Chadwick Boseman's performance. And man, it just kind of reminded me of that, and I can't help but think about that after seeing this film.
Yeah, and from the sound of it, we're not going to get much, if any, more T'Challa, which is devastating too. But I'm. Yeah, especially with where the film fell, because we just passed the year anniversary of Chadwick Boseman's death. It is, especially when he's in the opening credits, like in the fanfare, like you see him there. It's like it did take me back to seeing Black Panther in theaters, like being like, this isn't as much as the MCU movies are made for me, I can tell a lot of this movie is going to be missed by me because it's not made for me. Like, this is not a culture I'm connected to, but I can still appreciate it for everything that it is. And I'm excited that anyone who is part of that culture gets to see this movie and gets to have their representation up on the screen, just like they did in Black Panther. They get it here for the Asian community as well. And I think especially these days with everything going on in the world, I think is important for that community to have this representation.
I agree. At the same time, though, I do feel like this was Disney Marvel mainstreamed Asian cinema. Like, I know a few people that really love this film. But if I ever tried to sit them down and watch one of my favorite Korean films, or one of my, I lived in Korea for a year, so I have a whole bookshelf full of Korean films and Chinese films that I fell in love with. And if I ever tried to be like, oh, you liked Shang-Chi, let me show you some other Asian cinema, they'd be like, no. Like, this is definitely mainstreamed version of that to fit in the MCU. But they did, and I got mentioned, it's not heavily inspired at all by Crazy Rich Asians, but I felt that valet moment was definitely a nod to that film, because you see Sean at the time of the film, dressing up, and then you see this really nice, I don't know if it was an Audi, I can't remember what car it was, this really nice car pull up, and this really, crazy rich Asian looking dude pull up, and hopefully I would think most of the people in theater is like, that's not the same Asian we saw dressing up. And then he throws the keys to Sean, and he's the valet. I was like, that's perfect. That's perfect. And I felt like it was a nod to this phenomenon of a film, Crazy Rich Asians, that came out not too long ago that just took the world by storm. So I liked things like that. But yeah, like you, I am a white guy, and I know that there are tons of things that I probably missed in this film, but I didn't feel like it was. I felt like they did well to mesh it with the universe that we've been watching, and if my friends who wouldn't sit down with a Korean film with me but would take this film and would love it, then that's the goal, right? So I think they did that well.
All right, anything else we want to touch on before we wrap this up?
We talked about the end credit scene. Let's see. We didn't talk about the end credit scene.
No, what was the end credit scene?
Well, I guess we talked about the mid credit scene. We didn't talk about the sister at the end. Did you see that scene?
I did not see that.
Oh my gosh! So there's an end credit scene, and at the bar, they said that Shang-Chi's sister went back to dismantle the 10 rings, and nope, she's now running the 10 rings. She's graffitied the whole place up. The dude with the machete arm now works for her.
Okay.
and she's introduced females into the army. So now they're half and half, females and males into the Ten Rings. And there was this wide panning shot of the complex, and it's got her graffiti all over it, and it's got wires for Wi-Fi and networking all over the place, and she's just sitting in her father's chair watching everybody train. So
okay, yeah. IMDb lied to me. All I saw I saw that there was the mid-credit scene, and then at the end it says the 10 rings will return. So I didn't stay for the end credits. I thought it was just going to be the message saying
MCU films, and you don't know better by now.
I always check IMDb for that. That's my bad. I guess I just got to go see it again. So
yeah. I mean, like you, I liked it a lot better than Black Widow. I felt there was a lot more passion going into this. I'll be interested to see what they do with this character going forward. There was a lot of similarities to previous MCU films, but there was a lot of uniqueness to it, and it got me excited. I mean, I have really been wondering what. Are we in phase? I don't feel like they're even committing to phases anymore. But what the MCU post Infinity Saga is going to be, and granted, we've had these shows that are canon, and they are plugging in things, that'll be affected in the movies. But coming back to the theaters, maybe it was just the exclusiveness of this and it not being on Disney. It really felt like they went all out for this. And the numbers don't lie, man. I feel like these numbers would not be where they were if they did the day and date release on Disney Plus. And they're not as great as before COVID, but they're killer for COVID. This is crazy good numbers.
Exactly.
And it shows that people will go if there's a movie they want to see, and if they're forced to go to the theaters, because we do know this is coming out on Disney Plus in a few weeks, so people still came out in droves to see this film, and I think that's really encouraging for the theatrical market.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with everything that is scheduled to come out the rest of the year, because Paramount's already started to shift some stuff, like Top Gun got moved again. So now,
oh my gosh.
Sony's already moved Venom, but they haven't touched Spider-Man No Way Home yet. So
they moved Venom up, which is interesting.
Oh, did they move it up again? I know they moved
it up.
I thought they moved
it. They just moved it this week from October 15th to October 1st.
Oh, so they moved it back. Okay. They've been shifting that around like crazy. So
all over the place, over the place. And Bond is supposed to come out the next weekend after that. If it still comes out, God hope it comes out, because we're gonna be in New York, and there's an AMC theater down the street from the Javits Center, and I would love to go see that film after one of the nights. So it still comes out.
I'd be down. I need to binge all his Bond movies before then. So.
Yeah, there's a Dolby Atmos theater down the street from the Javits, and Josh Berkey and me went to see Blade Runner 2049 at that theater on one of the nights after New York Comic Con, and I love that theater. Maddie and I went to see Joker opening weekend at that theater, and she went in her Joaquin Phoenix Joker outfit. The security even made her take the face paint off her face in order to get in. So that's kind of been a tradition for New York Comic Con. Yeah. So I hope that Bond stays at that weekend, because I would love to see it that weekend.
Well, since you brought it up, I guess we can tell people you can come see the two of us at New York Comic Con. You want to talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, so New York Comic Con is happening on, it's the weekend of, I think it's the 7th through the 10th, October 7th through the 10th. I, once again, have a small press booth there. This will be my 6th year back to New York Comic Con. I bring my comics and my books. Some of them are behind me. And, we didn't have it last year. This year's kind of been up in the air, but they have committed to it. And so I'm so happy to come back, and I'm going full blown this year, and New York is always just crazy, and it's nice to have somebody working there with me to keep me sane, to talk to, and to also help talk to other people. And I'm so grateful to have you coming this year. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've only ever gone to New York Comic Con as like just a guest, just going and doing like the normal stuff, the panels, the floor. So I'm excited to actually be there and spend a few days, get to see all the cosplays and all that. So I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to teach you about my books so you can sell them properly.
Absolutely.
But, the best thing about being an exhibitor there is that you can go in hours before it opens and enjoy the con with nobody there, and walk freely and breathe and everything.
Awesome.
They're supposed to have limited capacity this year. I'm not sure what that means, but if you were thinking about going to New York Comic Con, they just put up some more tickets. I guess New York City is allowing more people to come, so they just reopened tickets on their website. So if you're listening to this and you weren't lucky enough to get them before they were sold out in July, hop on there because they're there. And they're starting to announce some great guests, like Hayden Christensen's going to be there, which is awesome. They've got great panels coming out. Outlander's going to have another panel this year, which my wife is freaking out about. She loves that show.
David Harbour's going to be there. John Cena will be there, but you won't be able to see him. But yeah, it's gonna be a good time. So if you're in New York, first week of October, come say hi to us.
Yeah, I don't know my booth number yet, but I'll be on small press on one of the corners on the top main floor. So I'll put some stuff out. But yeah, stop by. I love meeting new people and old people that I've met every year there. It's always a good time.
All right. Well, Josh, where can people find you on the social medias?
You can look up Nerf Herders Assemble for the podcast that I'm on pretty frequently. You can find me at www.fierceliterature or fiercelit.com, and all of my socials are associated with that. How about you?
All right, they can find me on my podcast, You Have to Watch This Podcast. We go live weekly here on Twitch, and we're also available on all major podcasting platforms. You can also follow me on Instagram at acram, CRAMM 4815. And You Have to Watch This is also on all the socials, so Instagram, Facebook, all that. If you're watching on Twitch, go ahead and hit that follow button for Victims and Villains. We also visit victimsandvillains.net for a lot of great mental health resources, phone numbers, literature. Everything's there that you or anyone who you think is struggling with their mental health. We have all the resources there for you to check out. And until next time for Victims and Villain Podcast, I'm Alan.
I'm Josh.
And we'll see you next time. Good mental health.